It's Isha here again. And today we'll be doing the second part of the earlier video that we did on currency crisis, which is also now the Raghuram Rajan series that we have started in order to bring forth the topics of economics that are currently the key issues in the papers. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to create a sort of a portal wherein all your economics related issues can be addressed through these videos, and we go slightly deeper starting from the beginning into them, so that it's like a one-stop shop for all your concerns with regards to that particular topic. And you can just listen through the video in case you're not interested in reading too much on the topic. So we're not really creating very big transcripts and all. We are only trying to put forth the information the best possible and comprehensive manner that you can probably, take in and absorb. We are always open to questions. You can come onto our Telegram group, or you can write your questions here itself on YouTube, and we'll definitely address them. So in the previous video, before I start this one, we talked about what really currencies are. What do we mean by appreciation of currency? What do we mean by depreciation of currency? How are they transacted? And I also gave analogies of currencies versus, how shares are done in the markets, how you can really compare so that you're not really confused between how currencies move against each other. Then we discussed on how do we really value a country's currency, like why is there a different value to every currency that we see. So in that we discussed some 5 to 6 factors that are listed below in here. So what we talked about was size and PPP of an economy. The higher the size and purchasing power, the better the currency is placed. It means that the currency is higher valued. Fixed or floating exchange rates are obviously one key determinant of currency valuation, because it's more about currency fluctuation, I would say, because fixed rates do not fluctuate that frequently as floating exchange rates do. Economic growth prospects, if there are high growth prospects, then the currency is also likely to appreciate. Growth of other similar economies, if they are growing, like the emerging market economies, if there's a lot of confidence in them, and India being an emerging market, it's likely that the currency will appreciate. But if there is another block, let's say developed countries, they are growing faster compared to emerging markets, then probably the currency would not appreciate as much or even depreciate versus dollar. Intrinsic factors of the economy, this is how a country is performing on different parameters in terms of economic growth, its confidence in the banking industry. There are a lot of other things that we talked about, which I would request you, in case you haven't seen the video, so do go through the first part before you watch the second one. The point that we left on was discussing the sixth point, which is the monetary policy in the country. I'll just get there now and talk about it. So monetary policy of a country is how through the money flow, I mean, I'm talking in a layman term so that you understand it, that how money flow is regulated across the country. Usually the role comes with the central bank, the RBI, which is the central bank for India. That in a way controls or tries to control the flow of money in the economy. When there is a lot of heating in the economy, that is, there's a lot of inflation, that then they try and follow a tight monetary policy wherein they try and reduce the liquidity with people. They try and make them save more or maybe invest more through different means and measures. And easy monetary policy, which is the antithesis of tight monetary policy. That is about, when the country is sort of facing either deflation or recession. So the central bank essentially tries and put more money into the people's pockets. It ensures that people spend that money by probably, different instruments like not giving too much of interest on FDs or savings accounts, so that people take their money now and spend it outside where they get probably higher returns, or they just consume things from it. And that, in a way, starts running the wheels of the economy. So monetary policy is the game of money that the government or the central bank, depending on whichever regime is there, they follow to enhance the growth in the economy, which is sort of the key dominant of the monetary policy, and also control inflation. So what are the different aspects that come into tight monetary policy? I mean, as in how does the central bank really control? I just gave one example earlier about interest rates. So it's actually about the interest rates increase. What happens is that there are different kinds of rates. I will probably be covering the rate part in one of the videos. There is repo rate, there is reverse repo rate, liquidity adjustment facility, bank rates, the multiple rates. But the determining rate, which you would be hearing a lot in most of the news items, are that what is the RBI going to do with the repo rate? So repo rate is the rate at which RBI loans money to banks. And the moment this rate changes, there is also an effect of the loans that people take. If there is a shift in this rate, if let's say it increases or it decreases, the loan rates for anything, be it commercial loans, be it education loans that you take, housing loans, anyone that takes the loans, that rate also is in sync with it. If let's say the repo rate is 6% and the RBI increases it to 6.5%, then your loan rates, if they are presently at 9%, they would become either 9.5% or 10%. So there is a cascading effect through interest rates. In a tight monetary policy, the interest rates are increased so that liquidity is sucked out of the system. If the interest rates are increased, the loan rates are costlier, then people would take lesser loans. If the loan rates are costly, there will also be a greater interest that you would find in different bonds, FDs, etc., because all the rates rise eventually. And you would tend to save more rather than spending too much. That's why it's an instrument for the tight monetary policy. When we talk of the currency, how it is affecting, because monetary policy is very internal. So presently we are talking about how currency is affected by monetary policy of a country, especially in a floating exchange rate regime. So when there are higher interest rates, there is more flow of funds from outside, because if people invest in the country at that point, they will be getting more interest on their investment as well, just like you would be getting more from FDs. Presently also there is an increase in the interest rates of FDs, if you would see, if anyone is saving at all. The same case happens for the funds that are flowing from outside. If loan rates are higher, if they invest, they will also get a higher return. Even the banks will get a higher return if someone takes a loan. The second one is open market operations. So in this, in a tight monetary policy, usually government, I'm actually discussing tight monetary policy, by the way, because presently we are inching towards that. So whatever I talk about in tight monetary policy, in an easy monetary policy, it will just be the opposite. So in that case, the interest rates will be reduced to induce more spending internally. Open market operations, the government sells here bonds to mop up the domestic currency. So essentially in this case, in a tight monetary policy, when the government, I mean not exactly the government, it's the RBI. So the RBI takes out bonds, and what they want is people to purchase those bonds, and that money is going to come to them, to the RBI, which in a way is going to reduce the currency flow in the market, because RBI is going to keep it in its chest rather than people having it. If they increase the interest rates, they give more interest, there are more bonds that will be purchased from the market. That will take up the domestic currency. So the amount of liquidity will reduce, and this is a very direct consequence. The way it affects the currency is because when you try and reduce the currency in the market, it's like buyback of shares. When you take away some shares, the price goes up. So it is also an instrument in which the currency can appreciate. CRR, SLR increase. So these two are ratios of monetary policies. That is the cash reserve and statutory liquidity ratio. These are maintained by the banks. So CRR, SLR are mostly in the range of CRR is around 4%, SLR is 26%. Right now the rates might be different slightly, 26, 22%. You can check the present rates. It's there anywhere. I mean, you just have to Google it. They keep on changing, though the change is not very frequent. So the idea here is to understand how they affect the economy. When you increase the deposit ratio, this is the money that the banks have to park with the RBI. and once they park this money, they cannot really use it for loaning purposes. There is no multiplier effect that happens. So this is like reducing liquidity if you store more money. If you just put that money into people's hands, rupee or any currency for that matter has a multiplier effect. It grows and it adds to the liquidity. When you try and reduce liquidity, then you increase the CRR and SLR rates. So more currency is picked up, it reduces inflation because less of money in the market. And it also helps somewhere in addressing appreciation of currency. I mean, it really tries to appreciate the currency a bit. Currency appreciation is also linked to inflation. The lesser inflation you have, the better your currency is going to perform. Demand for goods decrease. What happens is that in a tight monetary policy, when you're following, your demand for goods is supposed to decrease, and also for your imports. So when you try and take away money, when the demand for goods, imports, also it's kind of, when it's decreasing, it's like a sequential process. You try and reduce the currency in the market through interest rates, OMO, CRR, SLR, etc. And so it leads to more money outside of the system. It just is mopped up either into savings or bonds or whatever. And you obviously have less to spend on goods. So your domestic demand of goods decreases. That reduces your inflation a bit. Your demand for imports also reduces. Whatever you were purchasing from outside, even if there is some equipment that you're buying that is imported, it will also decrease because you have lesser money. I mean, the loans are really expensive. So you would try and either defer it, you not take it, or maybe find some substitute for it. So this way, again, when your demand for imports also reduce, that's when your currency starts stabilizing, because you will not be demanding so many dollars if you're not trying to purchase imports too much. And if you do not demand so many dollars, your currency against dollars is not going low. Finally, the effect is that there is appreciation. There are increasing forex reserves if these steps are taken one after the other. Trade balance improves because you are demanding lesser of imports, and your currency, since it is already very depreciated, as is the case right now, your exports obviously are more competitive to any country outside. So monetary policy of a country also affects strongly the currency movement. You can have tight monetary policy to have your currency appreciate. However, in the country right now, we are not seeing a lot of push towards the tight monetary policy, is because if you do that, a lot of money will be taken out of the system. Investments will stop. Whatever investment that the private sector is doing, even the public sector, if they find it expensive, they will stop doing it. It will lead to probably a stage wherein there is even lesser employment generation and the economy is going to go into a spin. So there is always a balancing act that you have to do, whether you chase your currency or the external markets, you try and balance it, or at times you just let your internal markets, the domestic currency, the domestic currency just go in the direction it is moving, and you do not pay too much heed towards what's happening in the external markets, because not everything can be controlled out there. So this is broadly how the currency movement happens in a flexible sort of a regime. Now, coming to the point of why is dollar strengthening against the rupee, which is actually the million-dollar question that people have been asking across, that what is happening to dollar. I will be addressing it in another 1 or 2 slides. So there are multiple reasons why dollar is strengthening against the rupee. Some of them are intrinsic to the Indian economy, but most of them are actually external factors. So if you see why this has become a pressing issue, that rupee is depreciating, is because in April itself, rupee was trading somewhere around 65 rupees per dollar. But now the dollar price in the country is around, in September it was 73. Right now it's probably, since we are right now in November, it's improved slightly. But to say the least, it is a big jump. Like suddenly dollar has become extremely expensive for us, which means that Indian rupee has significantly depreciated against the dollar. So what has been, one of the major reasons has been the tightening of monetary policy by Federal Reserve, that is the central bank for United States. So, as I was mentioning earlier, that's exactly the reason why I talked about monetary policy, how it affects internal economy and eventually the external economy as well. So, if you follow tight monetary policy, just like US is following right now, so they are increasing their interest rates, which was earlier an expansionary or easy monetary policy in which they had like almost zero interest rates on any loans. People could take loans very easily. So anyone who's investing in that country is not really getting any returns out of it, because if you give money to somebody, there it's almost interest free. There's 0% interest. So U.S. currency had significantly depreciated in the post subprime crisis scenario. But presently, they have, I mean, I wouldn't get to the growth part right now. Presently, they are increasing their interest rates. So, the tightening of monetary policy, as you saw in the earlier case when we were discussing about the monetary policy effects, so the currency actually appreciates when you tighten the monetary policy because your currency gets into more demand. More people want to invest in your economy. So during subprime crisis, most of the money actually went out. I mean, in terms of investment, the money flew out of US into a lot of emerging market economies. That is why they saw a lot of growth. India was like the rising star across the horizon. It's still rising, but the period, like somewhere around 2014-15, was really significant because a lot of money was coming into the country because of higher rates versus a rate which is like nearly zero. So when they start increasing the interest rates, obviously investment is going to be pushed to the developed countries again, particularly US. So if more money is going there, it's generating more demand for dollars, more money going, which means people are demanding more dollars to invest in that country. And so the dollar price is appreciating. If dollar is appreciating across the board, then obviously your currency as well as other currencies in the market, they will depreciate. Then presently, US is recovering with a GDP growth reaching almost 3% by 2019. That's at least the projection. So, in one of the slides, we also discussed that when the economy is growing, when there is perspective of GDP growth, there is higher investment that takes place because people feel confident investing and that they will be getting more returns. There is higher employment generation, there is more business coming in. So the pool is sort of limited. If it is moving towards US, obviously it is draining away from the emerging market economy, especially countries like India. And also the interest rates so far have reached already 2%, which were nearly 0% a year or so back. So the cumulative effect is that dollar is strengthening because of a higher demand, more expectation out of it, out of the economy that's going to grow and generate more returns for people who invest there. The other part which is affecting, especially in India, is that increase in oil prices. And if you would have read through some news earlier, that shale is like the big boom industry for US, especially in the Permian Basin, wherein they are literally bringing out as much oil as possible. That's their main basin for shale oil production. So they are very gung-ho on it. And now US has become one of the, I think, third or fourth largest producer of oil, giving out almost nearly 11 million barrels of oil per day, which is significant. So that ways there is again an economy boost. But there are countries like India that are importing oil. So for them, they again demand dollars. Whenever you import, you need dollars to do the import transaction. So a country like India, which is predominantly an importer of oil, they will again demand more dollars. And for US, it is a rise in exports, but for India, it is a rise in import. And so US currency again strengthens because their currency is in demand. Then there are other policies, like they're also following a loose fiscal policy and the trade protectionist policies. They're also helping the rise of dollar because with trade protection, they're trying to also increase the usage of domestic products, which will again demand dollars. Loose fiscal policy is also, sort of expansionary. Basically, it's an expansionary fiscal policy when there are also a lot of investments that are happening inside the country. At least it's aiding investments to happen. So when you have an expansionary fiscal sort of a policy, again, it's like a multiplier effect. Monetary policy is also trying to improve the investment, so is the fiscal policy. So it's the big question is now that okay, US is strengthening. That's like across the board, US is strengthening because of a lot of things that are pumping its economy and it's growing. Be it oil, be it employment, be it more funds going into the economy, be it manufacturing jobs. But then is really India the only child that is getting affected, like the Mercy kid, or are the other currencies equally affected as India? So. The answer is no, obviously, because most of the emerging market currencies are depreciating against the dollar because the funds are going towards US, and the export leverage that they had to US, that they're the exporting countries, that's also reducing because of trade protectionism, just like that US-China war that is happening. So it's also affecting the trade confidence of people and the exports to US. So if you do not have a lot of exports, then your currency is again losing demand, and that is why it's depreciating more. But then, how is India really faring? This is one graph that actually shows, it gives a clear picture that although a lot of the currencies are performing badly against the dollar, be it Thailand, Singapore, Chinese, Indonesian, Rupee is the worst performer. So in the graph, you can say that we have lost nearly 12% against US dollar in less than a year, which is it's not unprecedented, but yes, it is a stark reality and it is significant. So this is clearly a manifestation that we are the most affected. The reasons why we are the most affected are that one is that India is an import economy. We are not really exporters. Our major exports are into textiles, diamonds, refinery products and services, but that's not a significant chunk. We always sort of have a current account deficit, which means that we import more. If there is more import happening versus export, then obviously we demand more dollars versus someone who's exporting demanding Indian currency. So if a country is, let's say, very export oriented, it is still easier to balance their current account deficit and their exchange rate because their currency also has decent enough demand when they are exporting, just like US currency when we are importing. So since India is predominantly an import economy, we do not have anything big or humongous that we export. That is why our currency is depreciating faster because of lack of demand. Price of oil is directly affecting Indian rupee because we import almost 80% of our oil requirements. Then again, it's like, trade is affecting our currency even more, especially because US currency is appreciating and also the oil prices. So it's like double jeopardy, double effect. So we are at the losing end. Then RBI is focusing more on inflation than currency control. So they are not really, targeting currency control to an extent that they could have done. And they're letting some inflation be there in the economy because that also leads to a lot of growth. So they are not intervening in the markets as they can with their current exchange reserves. If they try and release those reserves, sell out the dollars, mop up Indian rupees against a swap bond, so obviously the demand of dollar will come down and rupee liquidity will reduce, but they are not exactly doing that. They don't want to reduce the liquidity as of now in the market. Then there is obviously flight of capital because of US trade war and Fed rate hike that we saw. So with the trade war fear, I mean, somewhere there is a jittery expression when it comes to investors trying to invest in the emerging markets. So they feel sort of jittery walking the slope when they're investing more in the emerging markets. And they really don't know which way the economy will be headed if there is really a war on trade. So all the markets might get affected. That is why, again, there is a flight of capital. One more reason, which I discussed in the earlier video as well, is that the Turkish lira. So that's again the phenomena where I was explaining that the bucket of economy that you are in, like the emerging market economy where India stands, if there is any shake in the bucket, for instance, when the Greece crisis happened, so there was a lot of confidence dip in the entire eurozone, but because of just one country. Similarly, what is happening to Turkish lira because of excessive private debt accumulation that they have? Lira is depreciated beyond a point, and the country is facing almost a payment crisis. So, because of that, there is again a slope wherein people are not very confident about what will be the future of the emerging markets, because it's again one sort of category that it is put into. I mean, that's like the peril of being bucketized, but it is the case. So, that is also affecting the Indian currency. So with this, we come to a close of the current lecture that we talked about, only focusing on currencies per se. We will be covering further topics that come on economy, just like RBI autonomy, what is really the oil economy about, how is oil affecting countries. We'll be discussing some of those in the coming lectures, but we will also urge you to give your suggestions wherever you think we should cover a topic, and we shall definitely take it up. With that, I leave you and have a good day or good night. And do keep watching our videos, like or share them. Thank you so much for your time. Bye bye.